If you're getting interviews, congratulations. You're actually ahead of the curve. But if you're not getting to the offer, you're likely doing a few things wrong, and I'm here to tell you what they might be. Hey everybody, it's Brian from Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about 5 common mistakes that people are making on interviews. As a recruiter and a human resources professional, I've spent the last 20 years of my career hiring thousands of people into some of the world's most prestigious and well-known companies. I've interviewed and hired everybody from receptionist all the way up to C-suite. I've sat in countless debrief meetings with interview teams and hiring managers as we discussed why one candidate ended up with an offer and another candidate was not going to. And make no mistake, it is really competitive out there, especially right now in today's market. With an abundance of qualified candidates for most roles, employers really have their pick of the litter. They can be very selective about who they choose and which candidate is ultimately going to end up with that offer. So going into the interview process, you really have to have your A game down. But if you're getting interviews, you're actually doing something right, so don't get too hard on yourself if you're not ending up with the offer. We may just need to tweak a few things to get you across the finish line. And I know a thing or two about what mistakes people make in interviews. So we're going to talk about them in today's video. Now, these are tried and true and battle-tested tips that come directly from the employer's mouth. If you're not having success, I recommend that you just step back and take a realistic look at what you might be doing wrong. Look at where you might be coming short and put together a corrective action. Remember, you're nearly there. We just need to get you across the finish line with a few tweaks. If you're looking for more information about how to land your dream job, I've got a website called lifeafterlayoff.com, and it's loaded with a whole bunch of great information. I've also got a course called the Ultimate Layoff Bootcamp. It's how to land your dream job. So this is for everybody, not just people that are laid off. And it really takes you from an insider's perspective through the entire hiring process. It's going to teach you how to get noticed by recruiters, get through all the rounds of the interviewing process, and land the best possible offer. Make sure you check it out. I'll leave a link for that as well. One of the first and most common mistakes I see is talking too much. This usually can be attributed to nerves, but it could also be that the candidate doesn't truly understand what's being asked of them. It also could reflect on the potential that you might lack some level of emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to cover emotional intelligence in the interviewing process in another video, but essentially what that means is that you can't properly gauge another person's emotions. Now, typically in an interview setting, that would be giving an answer and looking for verbal feedback or verbal cues from the interviewer about, are you on the right path or not? As an interviewer, I do try to give some verbal and even physical feedback to the candidate if I think that they're on the right path. And alternatively, if you're not on the right path, I usually try to give some nonverbal and verbal clues as to, maybe you're not quite hitting the mark. Now, when a question comes up and you start to go through your answer, now a lot of times what it is not taking the time to formulate what's being asked, and then you start to just speak. Halfway through your answer, you might think like, am I answering the question correctly? Maybe they're looking for this other thing. So then all of a sudden you start to split off into branches off of the main question. And now you're answering stuff that I didn't even ask you. And ironically, when you start to branch off into these unrelated stories, you generally don't even answer the original question to begin with. Now, after the candidate is kind of grasping and starting to ramble, I'll usually stop and refocus the question. Maybe I'll rephrase it or give them a little bit of a hint as to what I'm looking for. But the candidate who rambles usually doesn't have a good understanding of what I'm looking for to begin with, and that's why they feel they need to over-answer the question. Now, I'll say this, every question that I ask you in an interview has a specific and meaningful purpose. I'm trying to learn a certain aspect of your background so that I can pair you up with the job profile I'm recruiting against. You're likely not going to just stumble upon or happen upon the right answer if you're guessing at what you think I'm asking you. It's better to pause the interview and put the question back on me and say, hey, I think that you're asking me about this, but can you clarify? I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the right information. Me personally, I always appreciate that because it shows that they've got a degree of self-awareness and business acumen. So don't feel like you're stepping out of line if you're asking the recruiter that question. And I'm always happy to clarify what I'm looking for. It's really not a trick when I'm in an interview with you. I'm not trying to trap you. I really just want to learn those specific aspects about your background so we know if we can move you on to the next round of interviewing. And in general, it's better to not give enough detail to an answer than to give too much to a point. So I'd recommend answering with a thorough yet concise answer, and if I need to learn more about you or about that scenario, I'll ask additional probing questions. Besides, any skilled interviewer is going to be able to know when to ask those probing questions and how to do it the most effectively. But don't get yourself into interview trouble by talking too much. The second major mistake I see is not being prepared. Not being prepared comes in a lot of different shapes and forms, so let's talk about most commonly what I see. If you show up to the interview and you have not read the job description, you've not visited the website, you don't even know my name, then the chances are you're not going to make a very favorable first impression. It shows me that you're not taking the job seriously, or you're not taking your career seriously, and you're certainly not taking my opportunity seriously. Now, if I send you on to the next round of interviewing, the same thing goes there. If you show up to that interview, and it's usually with the hiring manager, and you don't know their name, you don't know the company that you're interviewing for, and you don't know anything about the position that you're interviewing for, it's going to be a really bad reflection on not only you, but on me as the recruiter, because they'll look at me as sending over a candidate that's clearly not prepared, and they wonder did I even talk to you? You're almost never going to get the position if you show up completely unprepared for the interview. It's actually better to reschedule the interview altogether than to show up unprepared. Do your research before you show up. Visit the company website. Make sure you check out the careers section of their webpage. Go and look at the open job posting that you're interviewing for. Check out their Glassdoor reviews. A little bit goes a long way. We're not looking for a book report, but we want to at least know that you're engaged on some level. In addition to knowing a little bit about the company and the position that you're interviewing for, it also would serve you well to be at least somewhat prepared for the interview questions that you might be asked. You're likely going to be asked about core competencies in some sort of behavior-based interview format. So prepare by thinking about scenarios in your background that you can apply to various competencies. You'll be able to pull from those experiences in a much smoother interview. Now, the next mistake is actually taking that to the extreme and being over-prepared. So if you come in and you start reciting a book report to me about everything that the company has done, digging into our investor relations materials and pulling out kind of obscure data, that's not necessarily going to impress me. I mean, it is going to show me that you're pretty engaged in the process, but it's almost a little overboard. The same thing goes for interviewing. If you're so rehearsed with your interview questions that you go off of a script, if anything deviates from your interview preparation, you're going to be kind of robotic, and you might end up starting to trip up. The more that happens, the more nervous you're going to get, the more you're going to be a deer in headlights. So you're going to come across as being overly nervous and inauthentic. Again, some rehearsing of interview questions is fine, and in fact, it's actually encouraged, but too much of it is a bad thing. Think of selling yourself in an interview as a series of story arcs, the major stories of your career. You're going to pull from those storylines to answer the various questions that you're confronted with. Authenticity is the key, and if you've truly done the things that you're talking about, you should be able to speak in depth about them with a level of passion and knowledge. Let's talk about the fourth major mistake. Now, this would be not being enthusiastic enough. If you come into an interview with me and you're pretty low energy and you just don't show any enthusiasm for the position, it's going to appear to me like you don't really want the job. So think about if you were the hiring manager, which candidate would you prefer on your team? Somebody that came in really energetic and excited about the opportunity, or somebody that came across as bored and uninterested in the interview? Being prepared for the interview goes a long way, but so does enthusiasm. Hiring managers look for that. They want that enthusiasm on their team because it's infectious. They want to be surrounded by people that are positive, upbeat, and ready to work. Now, if you're an introvert and this doesn't come naturally to you, it's something that you really should be practicing. Go in front of a mirror and try to work on your energy level. The fifth most common mistake that I see is candidates not asking any questions. Now, if you've gone through an entire interviewing process and you've met with a variety of key stakeholders in the business and you've met with your hiring manager and you haven't had any questions about how your role contributes to the success of the department or some of the specifics around what objectives you're going to be working on, you're going to be looked at as somebody that's not engaged. Keep in mind that interviewing is a two-way street. You should be interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you. Because if you're truly passionate about your career, you should be very selective in the roles that you accept. Make sure you check out my video on why steady jobs are bad for your career if you want to learn more why. So come to the interview prepared with good questions to ask both the hiring teams and specifically your hiring manager. Ask questions about the culture. Make sure that it's the right fit for you on all levels. It's going to impress the teams and they're going to look at you as somebody that's potentially a very engaged employee. So if you've gone through the interviewing process and you've made some of these mistakes in the past, don't fret about it, but it is time to start reflecting and figure out ways to change going forward. And that's really the purpose of this video, is to give you some ideas on what things you're doing well and what things you could probably tweak a little bit. With a little bit of strategy and a lot of planning, you can finally land that dream job that you've been waiting for. Hey, if you found value in this video, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I've got a ton more content planned and I'm going to be bringing you videos each and every week. Thanks for dropping by, and I will see you on the next one.